It's GBH's Morning Edition. I'm Joe Mathieu. Thanks for being with us. It was tough to watch yesterday, and we're still trying to make sense of it all this morning. We're joined now by GBH News senior political editor Peter Kadzis, who was, of course, watching all of this with us yesterday. Good morning, Peter.
Good morning, Joe.
I want to start with a moment that was captured on video by a pro-Trump supporter and posted online, showing Capitol Police opening the security gates outside of the Capitol building to allow these extremists inside.
Police are squabbling with protesters. Oh, there we go.
This is from TikTok. You can see them overrunning the security barrier. Police have their hands up. Breach the Capitol again. A stunning thing to watch. And of course, to be fair, many Capitol Police officers, most of them fought off these people for hours, even shot one protester trying to climb inside. She later died. But Peter Kadzis, these people should never have gotten that far to begin with.
100% correct, Joe. The insurrection, the attack on the Capitol yesterday was many things. It was first and foremost a security failure. Anyone who's covered or watched any number of violent or confrontational demonstrations could spot hours before this happened that the Capitol Police were insufficiently staffed. There weren't enough of them, 500 or 600, I believe, versus 40,000 demonstrators. Then, on top of that inadequate staffing, you have widespread instances of complicity. Not only the opening of the gates, but as many people will have seen from videos and still photographs inside the Capitol, Capitol Police posing for selfies with these insurrectionists, smiles, high fives. As you pointed out, the majority of the men and women did their job, but it's very, very alarming.
I covered Capitol Hill for a pretty long time, Peter. For a better part of 15 years, I would make my way through that same entrance that you could see the big crowd around there on the northeast corner of the building. In many cases, you get to know these guys on a first-name basis. They're some of the best law enforcement officers in the city and in the country. That's how they get on that squad. What does this say about the people now protecting the U.S. Capitol? Does this launch some sort of investigation?
Inevitably, it will. I mean, there are clearly rotten apples. It was unprofessional conduct. Listen, later in the day, when the 6 o'clock curfew was falling, lines of Capitol Police, DC Police, federal marshals, FBI were assembling to disperse the crowd. You saw hundreds of them in riot gear.
Yeah.
That's what should have been there.
At like noontime.
Yeah. I mean, anyone of a certain age will remember the big demonstrations on Washington in the 60s and 70s when the Pentagon and the White House were ringed with troops. Now, I understand the desire to not militarize this. Keep the troops in abeyance, keep them out back. But we have more than enough uniformed police, or in the case of the FBI, put them in jumpsuits and give them riot sticks to deal with this.
I want to ask you about the politics, of course, while you're with us here behind all of this, and things are very confused right now and obviously very divisive, Peter. But the words of Mitt Romney are echoing in many quarters around the country this morning. Likely, I think we can say, the most outspoken Republican member of the U.S. Senate when they came back into the chamber yesterday.
Now we gather due to a selfish man's injured pride and the outrage of supporters who he has deliberately misinformed for the past 2 months and stirred to action this very morning. What happened here today was an insurrection incited by the President of the United States.
It's a remarkable thing to watch and listen to. We saw him berated on his flight to Washington with the crowd on board the airline chanting traitor. He was approached, if not intimidated, by protesters in the airport. What role in this party is Mitt Romney playing now, Peter Kadzis, And will he be the head of a new wing of the Republican Party?
I think he'll be something. I think he is something more important, which that is the conscience of whatever remains of the Republican Party.
What does
Um,
remain of the Republican Party? Where's it going to be in 2 years?
Joe, I have no idea where it's going to be in 2 years, but I don't agree with those people who say this is the end of the Republican Party. Almost 50% of the country voted Republican. Now, I'm not suggesting all of them supported the insurrection, but Romney put his finger on it when he said Trump has incited these people. On a very conservative podcast, the Commentary podcast, I think it was Monday, one of the panelists said that there is something radically wrong with the base of the Republican Party. This is a pro-Republican conservative podcast.
Well, some have suggested we see a split in the party. Obviously, there are many Republicans who do respect law and order and were horrified by what they saw yesterday, and in fact have been offended by this standard bearer of the party.
Right, but let's stick close to home. Jim Lyons, the head of
Yes.
the Massachusetts Republican Party, was quick to tweet out his opposition to this takeover. But all you had to do was, go back in his Twitter feed a few days, and you saw loads of, tweets with images attached supporting the Trump protest. Guys like Jim Lyons need to understand and draw a distinction that the president they support, President Trump, is the one orchestrating, leading, inspiring the violence that they decry.
Remembering that yesterday at that so-called Save America rally, he said, in fact, he would march with them. He did not, but called them to march to the Capitol and to not show weakness. We also remember the tweet, Peter, quote, "Big protest January 6th. Be there. Will be wild."
Yeah, he's the grand puppet master. I think political moderates have been lulled into submission by the thought that Trump is on his way out and only has a handful of days left. We are now in the most dangerous part of the Trump presidency. Let's not forget, and I'm not suggesting he's going to.
And by that you mean the next 2 weeks?
The next 2 weeks are potentially the most dangerous part of the Trump presidency.
Peter Kadzis, I've got to run to the news. Stay with us and we'll talk more about this. We've got a lot more to cover here on GBH's Morning Edition.